Okay, so if you object to recording, you are welcome to exit. And Viviana, thank you for coming to be our speaker today. We can't wait to hear the updates from Climate Reality Project and your take on it. It's welcome, and you're welcome to share.
Great, thank you. Let me get this going there. Can everybody see the first slide?
Yes.
All right. All right, well, thank you. And good morning. And thank you, Svetlana, for all the coordinating, and Douglas also for the invitation. Like we said, I'm Viviana Vargas, and I'm the co-chair of the Houston chapter of the internationally active Climate Reality Project. And thanks again for sharing your morning with me. Our chapter is part of a nationwide Our Climate Moment from Acts to Action campaign. It's kind of a mouthful. We are 100% a volunteer-based organization, and we have 3 key initiatives this year that we're focusing on. One is always informing the public through presentations, like the one I'm doing today about 2 key laws for justice and clean energy, which have benefits available to taxpayers. The other is supporting local green initiatives, such as tree plantings and prairie plantings in the Houston area. And this year in 2024, we're going to focus on increasing the environmental voter turnout. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch on some highlights of the Inflation Reduction Act, and then speak specifically about the credits available for those of you interested in electric vehicles. So in August of, oops, is the slide not moving? There we go. In August of 2022, the U.S. passed its largest, most comprehensive climate change and emissions reduction bill, and it's called the Inflation Reduction Act. The IRA allocates $369 billion to energy security and climate solutions. In addition to the IRA, we have the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which allocates about $1.2 trillion to a variety of things, such as transportation, infrastructure, public transit, and climate resilience. The IRA is the largest, best piece of climate legislation that any country has ever passed in history, and it's something that we should all be proud of. So what does this really mean for us? The IRA puts us on a path toward achieving our 2030 climate and emissions goals while promoting environmental justice, creating domestic fair-paying new jobs, and with an expected 9 million new clean energy and climate-related jobs by 2032. So the IRA also is, equal to, it could cut in annual emissions that are equal to 215 million gas-powered vehicles off the road. And it is projected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below 2005 levels by the year 2030. So where do the emissions reductions come from? Well, clean electricity, of course, solar and wind replacing fossil fuels. Then there's clean vehicles. EVs are beginning to replace the internal combustion engine at a higher rate. And that's the largest source of emissions in the US, second largest in the world. There's also regenerative agriculture and sustainable forestry, as well as more efficient buildings. And that could be, this number could be actually bigger if we can get that pickup in heat pumps and insulation, better windows and the like we were just talking about this morning, right? As far as getting weatherized and whatnot, that would help buildings. So what's in it for Texas? Well, a number of things. So obviously there's lower energy costs, good paying clean energy jobs, small business tax credits, EVs, rural opportunities, just a number of different things that we can all benefit from. So what do? I'm all about, taking the information and then doing something about it and making change. We all have to get active. So the IRA is, what it's doing is incentivizing us to electrify everything. Our homes, our vehicles need to be more energy efficient. We need to get more active, take advantage of those tax credits and rebates that are available. We educate our communities on what's available through the IRA and gain access to clean energy incentives for our households, businesses, and organizations. And we can also advocate for new local laws that boost the electrification of buildings to take advantage of these tax credits that are available. So these are the credits and rebates. There's some examples of how you can take advantage. So for example, if you're remodeling your home or your old AC unit goes out or your old gas water heater finally dies, then we encourage you to avoid replacing that new unit with another one just like it. It's now time to rethink the decisions that we're making. So think electrification, think reducing carbon impact, think tax credits and rebates. And so how do we do that? We start with these tax credits. The credits are available now and for the next 9 years. The basic rule is that you can receive 30% of the cost of the listed item as a federal tax credit, which means if you owe taxes, you can deduct a credit from what you owe. You also get a 30% credit for home projects such as weatherization, installing energy efficient windows and doors or panel upgrades, so electrical panel upgrades, as well as any labor costs that were involved with getting those upgrades done. Those can all be included in that credit, and you get a max of $1,200 per year. And this is for existing homes only, not for new homes, and cannot be carried over to the next year. However, these credits do renew every year, so you can phase your projects out to take advantage of the credit. So for example, if you can't do solar panels this year, but maybe next year you're going to budget for it, that credit is available to you again next year. However, the credit does drop in 2033. It'll drop to 26%, and then in 2034, it'll drop to 22%. So there's a little incentive there to start getting those projects done sooner rather than later. So as far as rebates go, they have been created mostly for the lower to middle income homeowners or even renters to take advantage of, and this funding is limited. So we urge you to take advantage of the rebates as soon as possible. And there are tribal specific fundings available for home and electrification appliances as well. So as far as the bipartisan infrastructure law, it allocates up to $7.5 billion for rapidly expanding charging infrastructure. And this is now where we start talking about the EVs specifically. One of the things that's been slowing people down from buying EVs now is what they call range anxiety. And if you, for instance, have a charger in your garage and you make local trips, nearby trips, whatnot, you know, you can charge at home, not an issue. But obviously, when we start thinking longer distances, we need a national network of high volume charging stations. And this new law actually creates the money to get that done. And I know Douglas maybe has shared his experience from traveling with his EV that he rented. And if he didn't, maybe he can share that today. So from now, I'm going to switch over and talk about specifically tax credits that are available for your EVs. And that's new and EVs that were purchased before 2022, as well as the used vehicles. And I also want to stop now and say that I am not a tax accountant. I am not any tax lawyer or anything like that. I essentially went to the IRS website and gathered information from different resources and just put it together to help inform everyone. So please check with your CPA or tax accountant to make sure that you're doing everything correctly. So things to know regarding new vehicles that were purchased in 2023. And beyond is that the amount of the credit will depend on when you took delivery. So regardless of the purchase date is when you actually took delivery of the car. There are some new requirements after April 18th of last year that basically say that you must meet the critical mineral and battery component requirement in order to qualify for the credit. If you place in service a new EV or FCV in 2023 or after, you may qualify for this vehicle tax credit. And at the time of the sale, the seller must have given you the information about the vehicle's qualifications, and the seller must also register online and report that same information to the IRS. And if that does not happen, your vehicle will not be eligible for the credit. You must buy it new, obviously, and any credits will be transferable to dealers starting in 2024, which basically means that instead of now getting a credit, the dealers are going to start offering a discount. So who qualifies? The credit is available for individuals and businesses. You must use it for your own personal use, not for resale. Of course, it should be primarily used in the US. And there are some adjusted gross income requirements. So that's kind of broken down here, depending on how you're filing is how you're eligible. So as far as the vehicle itself, it qualifies if it has a battery capacity of 7 kilowatt hours. The gross vehicle weight rating must be less than 14,000 pounds and be it must have been made by a qualified manufacturer and undergo final assembly in North America. I've included a website where you can check the final assembly requirements and lists of companies that do that and whatnot, so you can check that out. And the vehicle must also meet those mineral and battery component requirements that I mentioned earlier. And there is a retail limit, so an MSRP limit of $80,000 maximum for vans, SUVs, and pickups, and a retail max of $55,000 for any other vehicles. Again, this QR code is to see if your vehicle is eligible. As far as the credit amounts, it's a little different depending on when you place the vehicle in service. So from January to April 17th of last year, the base amount of the credit is $2,500. You get an additional $417 if the vehicle has that 7 kilowatt hour battery capacity, and an additional $417 for each kilowatt hour of battery capacity beyond the 5 kilowatt hours. And then a total max of $7,500 for new vehicles is the credit. Remember, this is also non-refundable. So if you don't use the full credit, you don't get, the rest back in cash or anything. So with regard to those vehicles that were placed in service after April 18th of last year, they must meet the same criteria, but the credit is a little different. You get $3,750 if the vehicle meets the critical mineral requirement only. And then if it meets the battery component requirement only, you get the other $3,750, and you get both if the $7,500 if it meets both requirements. And of course, if you don't meet any of the requirements, then the vehicle is not eligible. So with regard to the electric vehicles purchased in 2022 or earlier, the max credit is $7,500. Again, it must be for personal use and use in the US. Qualifying vehicles, however, must have an external charging source. The weight limit is the same, and they must have been made by a manufacturer that hasn't sold more than 200,000 EVs in the US. And if you miss claiming your credit for an EV purchase before 2022, you may still be able to claim it by filing an amended return. So again, check with your CPA or your tax accountant on that. And then you can scan this different QR code to get to the information on the 2022 or earlier vehicles. So things to know about used vehicles is they must be purchased as of January 1st of last year. Must have purchased them from a must purchase a qualified vehicle, and they must be from a licensed dealer. And purchases made before 2023 do not qualify. So who will qualify for these used clean vehicle credits? Again, similar as the others, you must not be the original owner. You cannot have been claimed or being claimed on somebody else's tax return, not have claimed another used vehicle credit in the 3 years before your purchase date, And the adjusted gross income is going to be a little less than the one for the new vehicles. So it's $150,000 per year if you're married, filing jointly, and then $112,500 if you're head of household, and $75,000 for all other filers. So qualified used vehicles must have a price tag of $25,000 or less. They must be 2 years or older than the calendar year of when you're buying it. So if you're buying one this year, it must be 2022 or older. It must not have already been transferred after August 16th of 2022 to a qualified buyer. And same requirements on the weight, and same requirements on the battery, and same requirements on having it used here in the US. And this is a different QR code. So if you want to get a picture of that, it will take you to the used vehicle information on the IRS website. So the credit amount for a used vehicle is going to be 30% of the sale price with a maximum of $4,000. This credit is also non-refundable, and it can't apply, you can't apply any excess credit to future tax years. I just did a little bit of research on the commercial in case anybody is interested, or you know of anyone who has commercial vehicles. They do get a credit as well. Businesses and tax exempt organizations qualify. There is no limit on the number of credits they can claim, and the credits are non-refundable. So there's more information on this link here as well for any commercial, if anybody's interested in that. And then how do you claim the credit? So for all vehicles, regardless, you have to file Form 8936 in your tax, along with your tax return, and provide your VIN number. For any that were bought before 2022, you must have taken possession of that vehicle in 2022. And regarding used vehicles, the dealer must have reported it and given you the required information. You also need these items on the information list. So your dealer has to provide their name and tax ID number along with your name and tax ID number, sale date, sale price, the maximum credit allowable, and the VIN number and the battery capacity. So make sure you get all that information. And so just kind of wrapping it up here is, how can you take advantage of the IRA incentives as a whole? Is you want to make sure that your household will owe any enough federal income tax to be able to take advantage of the credit. You want to make sure that you your purchase meets the tax credit relevant efficiency and or product standards, and that you save your receipts, and that you fill out all the appropriate forms. This is a quick snapshot of what I covered as far as electrification for homes, your solar, your EV tax credits, and all of that, and how it's broken down. So if you'd like to take a screenshot of that. And then we just need to start planning. You can get both the rebate and the tax credit if you qualify. You want to start planning those home projects now to take advantage of all of this. Remember, there is no carryover. So you want to stage your home improvements to max out your tax credit every year, and do your analysis. Obviously, you want to make sure that what you're doing is cost benefit for you. We know that it's going to benefit and reduce impact on the planet. And also just to keep in mind is your principal home qualifies, but so does your vacation home or a second home. And any credits after 24, you can't claim credit unless the manufacturer creates an ID. So what was happening is, since these laws were so new, the retailers and the manufacturers weren't ready with proper IDs and codes and whatnot. So the IRS was accepting receipts and just your word on the fact that you spent the money. But now moving forward, you should be able to have those IDs from manufacturers available. This is just a slide that gives you all the resources of where I got the information if you'd like to take a look and research more for yourself. And that is it for me. What we like to do at Climate Reality Project is ask everyone who has seen the presentation to go to this link which will take you to a form where you can pledge that you plan to take on some sort of electrification project for yourself, your home or your car. And that also gives us credit for getting the word out. So that is all I have for this morning. So any questions, I'll try to answer as best I can. And I'll also let Doug pop in there. He's very well versed on this topic as well, and he can help back me up with some questions. So thank you so much.
Great. So much good information. Yeah. So questions, folks.
Oh, I have a question. I heard that the weight of the vehicles for EVs are much heavier than ICE internal combustion engines. And do you know if the infrastructure bill covers reinforcing some bridges and maybe doing some roads to take that extra weight? And is that a big problem, or do you think that's a small problem that can be covered easily with the infrastructure bill?
That is a great question. I don't know the details of the infrastructure. Douglas, are you aware of that at all?
Nope, no comment.
Yeah, I've been mostly focused on the home electrification and how to take advantage personally. So I haven't really looked at how the infrastructure, but I can look into that for you.
Oh, well, that's okay. This is a great presentation on the credit picture and the profile of all the credits and how all the restrictions and the requirements are for taking credits. So I appreciate that. I'll have to study the recording to get more information because it's quite a bit of information produced. I thank you very much.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Yeah, folks
Yeah,
will
that
have
was
to
one of-
see what is applicable to their personal situation. You know, somebody who's renting wouldn't be able to put in a heat pump or something, but they could do something with the purchase of a car, especially purchase of used EVs. That's the real exciting thing, that they've done that now federally, because yeah, there's quite a growing market now in used EVs. 10 years ago, the EVs that people had were either brand new manufactured ones or ones that were what we call homebrew. So ones that people have been doing for many decades. So the National Electric Vehicle Association started in 1967, and it was folks converting gasoline vehicles, taking out the gas engine and putting in their own motors and batteries. And so now that there've been enough manufactured ones out on the roads, there's used ones available. People can go shopping for used ones, see what kind of range meets their daily needs. If they're not going to take any trips, then a lower priced used EV with a smaller range might just be great for getting around the city. So in the chat, I see there's a question here from Esther. What is the meaning of mineral requirement?
That's another great question. So like I said, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a tax accountant or anything, so I'm not sure how they I don't know much about EVs. I know, Douglas, you've done a lot of research on EVs. So the mineral requirement, I would presume, has to do with what is used for the batteries, to make the batteries. Am I going in the right direction there, Doug?
I'm sure you are. That was my conclusion too.
Yeah, kind of the one word that I would add in there is mineral sourcing requirement, because that's what the concern is, why the federal government, there's a number of different aspects. You can obviously analyze these new laws, but there are agreements between countries, free trade agreements. So for example, Chile and the US have a free trade agreement, and Chile has the high desert that is a good source of lithium. And that, of course, is one of the minerals that's key to these batteries. And so I think what the concern of the legislators is that we don't want to be dependent on sources of minerals where there are either conflicts or I think the terminology is entity of concern. So the federal government doesn't want to say that, some country is a potential enemy of the US that might go to war or something. But
Yeah.
if it's an entity of concern, of course, entity, then you don't have to say what's a country and what's not a country, because of course that's also
And
politically
that makes
broad.
it very broad as well. So
Yeah. But around the world, there's sources for these minerals, and then there's also locations where the minerals are refined, because you can't use the different elements when they're in oxidized form and so forth, or combined into carbonates. You need to refine them to purify them in the same way that you have to purify silicon to make either computer chips or solar cells. And so the growth of the battery industry is going gangbusters. A lot of it is in parts of the world where we're not so sure that they're stable and so forth. And so in order to encourage, and I guess you might say North American, because it also includes Canada and Mexico, sourcing of minerals and sourcing of the production facilities. Here in Texas, there's one that's being built currently for refining lithium. So getting lithium out of the natural combinations that it's found in nature, and purifying it so that it can be built into batteries, because batteries for EVs and batteries for stationary uses are just going through the roof worldwide. And some people maybe have heard about the additional stability of the grid in Australia that's been added because of a lot of batteries that have been put on the grid there. It's a very sparsely populated country in general, and so you've got these long power lines, and so batteries are critical, but the US doesn't want to become dependent on any one part of the world. So the sourcing of the minerals that go in the batteries is what that's referring to. And that's what these big companies need to worry about, that. But where it hits us as consumers is that trickles down into what gets built into the cars. And to encourage the manufacturers to you might say, be more responsible, the law requires the sourcing of the minerals to be done in what the law considers a good way.
thank you, Dave. That's a brilliant answer. And I learned a lot right there. I bring you along to my presentations.
Say we had some good news recently in the news. It might not be in Viviana's charts, but dealerships can apply now to the federal government and give the customer $7,500 right away when they drive away with the car. Then it's the dealership that needs to wait for their rebate or whatever. There's a delay for the dealership to get that $7,500, but the new car buyer drives away with a discount of $7,500. Most dealerships are eager to sign up for that and are doing that, I've read. And Tesla leads the field, but they don't have a dealership, but I suppose that applies to them as well.
I've just read something that, Tesla's been working on it at the very beginning of 2024. The first couple of weeks of January, they didn't have it set up, but either it's just now been set up or it's just about to be, because of course Tesla sells a lot of new cars, and so they want the buyers of the new cars for the models that it applies to. In other words, the 7,500 may be all there, it may be half there, it may not be available at all, because it depends on the car. And that kind of leads to Esther's next question in the chat. Well, then does the credit amount change based on the type of car?
Yes, and it will. It will. And that's why, so be sure to check those links that I provided, because there are a lot of more detailed documentation links in the IRS website for that information. So you can definitely look into that. And I don't know that all CPAs and all tax accountants know all the details, since this is so new. So it is good to reference the website. They do have a lot of great documentation there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe your presentation covered this, but what about hybrid cars? Like a lot of people own a Prius, and you get some credits for that still, or is that already gone?
I don't believe so. I don't believe there are any credits for hybrids.
Yeah, Mike, electric car, next one. But seriously, on I wanted to answer the question that Esther had posted. I think it's a follow-up on discussion earlier on the amount of credits for depending on different either mineral sources and so on, the content, mineral requirements. Her question is, does the credit amount change based on the type of a car? And it's not necessarily the type, but there's a pricing, various requirements. And so depending on the specific car, which category that car falls under, that amount of credit would change. And perhaps either Viviana or Dave and Douglas can fill in a little bit more on that answer.
Douglas, you want to make a comment?
What was the subject? It was about the minerals.
The difference, that credit amount change based on the type of car, is it?
Well, if it seems confusing, I can reassure you about that, because anybody who's interested in buying a car will not be confused. There are lots of lists out there that say, well, this week, here's the cars that qualify for $7,500, and here's the cars that qualify for half of that. So if your interest is in buying a car, you know, there are lots of guides out there that'll tell you right away, yeah, this qualifies with these limitations and these restrictions, and it's easy to understand. If you're interested in how the law was made and every detail of the law, it's I'm sure there's lots of complicated conditions, but for the buyers, it's not confusing.
So with regards to type of car, so for new vehicles, the federal government rules have divided cars into two classifications. So the maximum sales price of something just called a car is $55,000, but if it's called an SUV, it's up to $80,000. Above that, I guess they consider the vehicles too much of luxury vehicles, and the government is not interested in providing you know, someone who can afford a high-priced luxury vehicle with a tax credit, which, as we've said now, is applicable right at the dealership point of purchase. So that kind of is where it comes into for cars. To me, the kind of the exciting thing is having the $4,000 available on used EVs. And yeah, I'm not sure what different types that applies to, but as your chart showed, there's certain limitations that it can't be sold and resold and resold and things like that. It has to be just one qualified buyer and so forth. But I do know that there's the $55,000 cap and then $80,000 cap on SUVs.
That's correct.
Because otherwise the same car can be flipped
Right.
endlessly.
Right.
And in the same hands that it came from initially.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It was a great presentation on the electric car for those the electric car purchases and the type of credits. Wanted to ask, what do you think the impact on both on the electric grid and then also from the purchasing electric cars? What is the benefit of doing that? Not necessarily in financial, but the benefit to the environment.
Sure. I mean, obviously the biggest benefit is going to be the emissions, right? So that's going to be drastically reduced. I think the percentage, was it 9%, 6% in that other slide that I saw, I think. So it's going to be a drastic reduction there. Of course, there are arguments on the flip side regarding the batteries and the minerals, right? So there's a lot of that. So if now we're going to start looking and mining for more minerals, for more batteries, then what's the impact there? So I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube about those two topics, and that is a concern. I don't know how they weigh out in the end. So so yeah, it'd be good to look at, but I know that emissions is the problem. All, you know, the CO2 that's being put out into the atmosphere is a huge concern. So combating that is a priority. And I think that using EVs is a way to do that, and electrifying our homes is a way to do that, because it's not just about the cars that are on the road. It's about what we're doing at home and how we're using, you know, coal to power everything. So I don't know I hope I answered the question.
Well, as you mentioned, in homes, I think one of the aspects is trying to get people to change from natural gas stoves to the electric, especially electric induction, because it's
Induction.
efficient, and then you don't have the emissions in the home even, which of course is critical too.
Absolutely. And that's a tough sell, just for people that are so, it's just ingrained in most of us, right? I mean, my parents grew up with gas, just because we come from a third world country, and that, you know, people still go to the store and get their little gas, you know, their little, they sell them here too at Kroger, but the little, I forget what they're called, but they're little gas stoves that they take home and whatnot. And this is for them to live every day, because they don't have homes with electricity just running through easily. So when you think about, you know, the population of people in the world that are so reliant on gas, it's difficult for them to say, oh, well, now I have to switch, but why? It works so well. And, you know, and the argument about how it's cleaner and whatnot, it's just, it's a difficult sell. But I think we need to start somewhere. And those of us who can make the change, even like we mentioned earlier, if you're renting, there are things that you can do. Rewiring America is another website that I referenced, and they have a really good checklist that you can download for how to electrify if you're a renter, how to electrify if you're a homeowner, how to get an energy audit for your home. So there's a lot of really great resources. But yeah, definitely moving in that direction and educating people and just letting them know what's available. But eventually, I would imagine that over the years, there's going to be less and less ability to purchase gas stoves, for instance. You know, they're going to start to be relics, just like those old yellow refrigerators and green refrigerators that we all used to have. Those are gone. So, you know, I would hope that in the next few years, we just have better products to choose from.
Yeah, and more energy efficient ones. But yeah, electrification, I think, is going to go a long way, which, thinking of the fossil fuels, one thing I wanted to ask you about was your opinion on the results from the recent COP28, which took place in the United Arab Emirates, which of course gets a lot of its country's income from drilling for oil and so forth. So
yeah, we actually just had, and Douglas had invited a speaker to our group earlier this month. We have a monthly meeting for the whole group in general, and he invited a speaker that did a recap on COP28, which was an excellent presentation. And he had the same feelings I had. I was very frustrated. Just so Climate Reality Project had a live stream of what was going on, which was good to plug into. But same thing, I mean, they did finally end up with an agreement with everybody. There was some, I guess, disagreements on the word choice of how willing they were to commit to, you know, transitioning. And so for the climate folks, I think it was a little bit of a disappointment, but you know, we have to take our wins where we can get them. And that's why for me, I was a little frustrated just watching, because of course they are, you know, on enemy ground is how I would call it. And, you know, these companies have a huge pull and a lot of money, and they can do what they want. And it's very difficult to change that, especially when profits are so priority. But I think you take the wins where you can get them, and just keep moving forward. So Douglas, I don't know if you have anything to add regarding the presentation the other day, but I did walk away feeling much better about it. It was a really great recap. We do have the recording. If anybody's interested, we can share that with you.
Yeah, if there's a link for that, if you could put that in the chat or get it to us later. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, we were really honored to have that climate scientist, so to speak, as our guest. I took a look at the COP28 UAE website, and there was a music video created especially for the COP, it appears, from a famous group called Playing for Change. They took an old hit called Waiting on the World to Change, and you'll love the music video, 3 minutes. I'll put a link to it in the chat. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, that sounds like it'd be great to listen to.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It was very informative, and unless we have any other questions, I think we can close for today. And
Let's see if Douglas can get the link into the chat before.
oh, okay, yes, true,
Yeah, going there right now.
Okay.
fabulous. Okay, I will give a chance for everyone